Chapter 641 Perfect Array Part 1. Those words made Lith almost slap his own forehead, but luckily he remembered in time about the orichalcum still covering his hands. Those are water creatures, but there can't be a big enough water body around here to sustain such a big colony. If that was the case, we should hear the underground water stream or at least smell a lot of humidity in the air. Does any of you perceive any of that? He asked. The group started to sniff the air like a pack of hounds. No, the air is drier than many places we crossed on our way here, said Professor Gaku. Exactly, so where the heck did they come from? Why we didn't hear them coming despite the ever-present echo? Those are good questions, but I can at least answer one of them. Professor Yandra said, Techs manipulate Earth. They must have made the ground softer to avoid making noise. That doesn't explain why they were so focused on us. If they were starving, they would have eaten their fallen first. Instead, they kept attacking like their lives were on the line even though we did nothing to provoke them. Lith looked at the tunnels. They were empty again. There was no trace of scouts or survivors fleeing from the scene. It doesn't make sense. My paranoia sense keeps tingling, he thought. I think he is right, Professor Sindra said. Either the Odie's longevity is a hard truth rather than a myth, or we must have activated some automated defense mechanism. No matter the answer, both of them mean that we are in front of the discovery of a lifetime. Half of us will. With all due respect, I give the orders here, Professor. Floria cut him short. Before resuming our search, the wardens must strengthen the barrier while my soldiers and the rangers rest. In the meantime, all those that didn't do anything will guard the tunnels. Sir, yes, sir, Marak said, spitting a bit of tech meat from the arm he was chewing. How certain are you that they didn't just come here following our noise? She asked Lith with a whisper. Remember this? Lith tapped the side of his eyes, resuming to speak as soon as she nodded him to continue. I'm 100% sure that those corridors were empty. Then there were 10 techs and after we started killing them others popped up. I mean it, I didn't see anyone walking. Then please rest and help us to find a way to open that door. This place is already giving me the creeps. Lith used accumulation while he looked around the cave. He remembered that both the White Griffin Academy and his tower had surveillance mirrors, so the idea that someone was actually looking at them from a distance was quite likely. Life Vision scanned every centimeter of the cave, searching for the transmitting device. Divination didn't exist. To spy on someone it was needed a transmitter that would capture the reflected light like a camera would and warp the images to the mirror. It could have been anything, but its magical aura was supposed to be visible. Unless it's cloaked, Solus suggested. It wouldn't make sense. Only awakened can sense mana and I doubt that those ODI creeps were awakened. Otherwise each body they occupied would have lasted centuries and they would have kept their magical talent. Lith replied. Maybe they weren't awakened, but they might have been aware of their existence. Solus suggested. Solus, do you realize that you've become a bigger pessimist than I am? Those words put an end to their argument and made Solus wish they were both wrong. Solus about the ODI and Lith about her. Unlike invigoration, accumulation had no rejuvenating effects. It would simply absorb the surrounding world energy and feed it to Lith's mana core, making it stronger. Since whatever Kula was built on a mana geyser, Lith could draw much more nourishment than usual from the environment. Even though hours of accumulation don't amount to much of a power-up, if I'm right about someone operating Kula's defenses, every bit can help. He thought as his enhanced body naturally recovered his mana and stamina. While Marak slept to recover from the fatigue of the fight, Lith ate some food and searched for the activation mechanism of the door. The entire stone wall had been enchanted and several arrays overlapped on its surface. Whoever did this was indeed a master warden, Solus thought. The runes comprising the various arrays never touch each other and have an even spacing between them, allowing the runes to work in perfect harmony. On top of that, it makes really hard to understand which rune belongs to which array. I'm afraid that I was right about the ODI being aware of awakened. Maybe and maybe not, Lith replied. There are things like Scarlet's Pants Nez or General Vor's staff that can make them visible to the naked eye. So far the only thing we know for certain is that they were crafty bastards. Lith placed his hands on the stone wall, as if he was searching for crevices or a hidden switch, and activated invigoration. It was the only means he had to bypass any kind of cloaking device that could hide the truth from his eyes. Invigoration required Lith to override someone's or something's mana flow with his own. It was a skill he had developed as a kid and it was second nature to him. Unfortunately, he had never used it on something that big. There was only so much space he could cover without spreading his resources too thin, dulling his senses. To make matters worse, the complexity of the arrays and the enchantment of the wall made it hard for him to properly examine their countless details. On the bright side, Solus could now deactivate her mana sense and focus solely on deciphering the incantation by sharing Lith's senses. Lith's antics drew more than one surprised look and several scoffs. Ranger Verhan, this is a waste of your abilities. If groping a wall was enough to bypass a protective array, then wardens and forge masters wouldn't have spent so much time and effort developing their spells for tasks like the one at hand. Professor Sindra said. There was no mockery in his voice, only sincere worry. If that idiot of my assistant was half as capable as Lith, instead of cackling at him like a child. He thought. Thanks for your concern, Professor. Yet we must consider that the ODI might have taken spells into account and resorted to some kind of mechanical trigger. Lith replied with the first believable explanation that came to his mind. Excellent point. Did you hear that, Khalil? Take a lesson from Ranger Verhan and use your brain. If by the end of the expedition your contributions amount to nothing, I'll have you fired. Just like the other assistants, Khalil had been noting down his master's findings so that he could later revise and make sense of the bigger picture. The rest of the time, the youths had been laughing behind the wall, groping Ranger's back. Suddenly, there wasn't much to laugh about. Instead of mindlessly writing, he started to rack his brain for a solution to the conundrum at hand. By Novel 2025. 1. Supreme Magus. Chapter 642 Perfect Array Part 2. By the time the artificial sun started to set, the members of the expedition decided to call it quits for the day. Yandra could make the sun rise whenever she wanted, but that would mess up their sleep cycle even more. Everyone was tired either because of the constant spellcasting or from trying to make sense of the collected data about the wall. Some, like Kyla, had a splitting headache from doing both. Marak and Floria's soldiers were pretty relaxed instead. They had slept, eaten, and spent their time playing dice or cards while guarding the tunnels. How do your weapons work, exactly? Lith asked Marak while eating dinner. The problem with the wilds is that you never know what mess you're going to stumble into. So I had a good forge master made me orichalcum weapons capable of shapeshifting at will. The sheaths are part of the weapons and the key to trigger their shapeshifting abilities. If I need them to be heavier, the extra mass comes from the sheaths. They are also made with orichalcum and are thicker than they look. Solus studied their pseudo-core with monosense and was relieved to discover that they had no runes engraved on their surface. It seems that we are right. Runes must be a state secret. The pseudo-core is very complex and it even required purple crystals to be stabilized. She thought. They shapeshift? That's it? Lith asked. That's it my ass. Marak was offended. They saved my life countless times. They have a few minor incantations too, but nothing more. Energy-based properties and orichalcum are hard to not mix together, smartass. I don't have that kind of money, he said while looking at the skinwalker in envy. Sorry, I didn't mean to belittle them. It's just that between the orichalcum and the purple crystals, I expected something a little flashier. What does your gauntlet do? Marak asked, ignoring the apology. Not much, yet. It's a work in progress. So far it can store a few low-tier spells and serve as a last-ditch weapon. The glove's fingers turned into claws. I think it's very useful already. If you ever mass-produce them, I call dibs. Why use stone as its foundation though? I told you, it's a work in progress. I used cheap materials because I constantly upgrade it, Lith replied. No duh, man, you are too stingy. Those magic crystals are smaller than my eyes and green and yellow at that. No offense, but that's lame. Lame? I've worked my ass off for years to get those too. Gems, things, whatever they are. Solus thought, can I please punch him on the nose? Any idea about how to open the door? Lith was stuck between a rock and a moron, so he was eager to change the topic. None and I don't even care. I get paid no matter the result of the expedition. Fighting an eldritch and those techs should be already worth a hefty bonus. Anything more is just gravy. Since there was nothing to get from him, except maybe getting cleaned up at gambling, Lith went to speak with Kyla. Aside from the professors and Solus, she was definitely the smartest person in the cave. How's your head? Lith asked. After I treated myself, the pain is gone, but I'm still foggy. I can't waste a tonic on our first day, she replied while massaging her temples. Gods, I feel so useless. I'm more of a deadweight in battle now than when we were still at the White Griffin and I can't even open a damn door. That's not true. You saved Floria's life and many others. As for the door, I'd say you were in good company. Lith tried to cheer her up. That was days ago. The only thing I've achieved today is getting prime calluses on my fingers. She showed him her right hand. After swinging the Forge Master wand for hours and using healing magic to treat blisters and skin irritation, her skin had hardened. Kyla could easily get rid of them, but since she seemed to have many hours of wand swinging ahead of her, it would have been pointless. While they were talking, one of the assistants passed them a copy of the information collected by the members of the expedition during the day. Withholding knowledge in front of a common hurdle was pointless. Each professor wanted the glory for themselves, but unless they got past the door, there was no glory to take. The data had been sorted so that each array could be studied separately from the others and from the door's enchantment, making it easier to identify their rune patterns and energy nodes. There was a lot of warden jargon on each piece of paper and Lith could only understand the terms that Kula's arrays and those he knew had in common. Kyla squinted her eyes hard as if there was something she couldn't focus properly on. Great, my headache is back. I give up. Good night, Lith. She put the notes in her dimensional amulet and stormed away. Why didn't you help her with invigoration? Solus asked. She's tired and frustrated with herself. The headache gives her a reason to rest and blow off some steam. If I make her head clear and she still fails, Kyla will feel twice as useless. Once because I fixed something that she couldn't in the second time because she would have no excuse for failing to open the door. Lith replied. Lith wasn't prideful. He didn't care how he solved a problem as long as he succeeded, so he had no qualms asking for help to his betters. He walked towards Yandra's campfire. Up to that point, the professor from the Black Griffin was the one he had the best relationship with. She had already taught him a few things and maybe she was willing to expand his understanding of ancient arrays. Professor Yandra, maybe it's a stupid question, but why no one has tried to use Clean Slate to open the door? Clean Slate was a Tier 4 Forgemaster spell that would temporarily disable an enchantment, so in theory, it might solve their problem. It's not a stupid question, Ranger Verhan. This array here, she said while showing him one of her notes. Prevents the lock from being tampered from the outside. If we use clean slate, it will trigger the first energy node and cause a chain reaction that will activate all the other arrays. Damn, I can't even use invigoration, then, he thought. It's not a spell, but it's likely to be perceived as an external energy. I don't know what most of the other arrays do, but they are too powerful for a blind tinkering approach. Lith started to ask her about all the runes he was unfamiliar with, and Yandra was happy to answer all of his questions. They had got off on the wrong foot, but the more time Lith spent with her, the more Yandra reminded him of his late mentor, Nana. Yandra wasn't that old nor her back hunched, but the fierce light in her eyes was the same as Nana's, and so it was her shameless approach to get what she wanted from people. It's fantastic that someone as young as you are has already comprehended the importance that every single rune comprising an array has. Most students are only interested in learning how to cast an array and how to bring them down. They don't care for the hows or the whys involved in the process. Hard to miss their importance when you see how runes affect the space around themselves and how the order of their activation can make so that the effects of two arrays comprised by the same runes are completely different. Lith thought. Alas, I'm too old and tired to keep going. The moon is high already. Get some rest. If more creatures attack us tomorrow, I'll be counting on your protection. Yandra smothered the fire with a finger snap and entered the women quarters. Lith remained alone for a while, sorting the new information acquired with Solus and taking notes on his own papers to later store them inside Soluspedia. Soon fatigue gave him a headache and his brain begged him for a break. Fighting is so much easier, he sighed. Your body can withstand a lot, but your mind still needs to relax. Go to sleep, I'll keep an eye on the situation. Outside her tower, Solus was unable to sleep or rest. It gave Lith an edge in many situations, but in the long term, it affected her sanity. Lith went to sleep near a guard post, ready to act at the first sign of danger. He trusted no one. Marak was too strange and the soldiers too weak for his taste. The professors were magically strong, some even more than Lith, but as Kor had demonstrated, it only took a single shot to take them down. Paranoia was a cruel mistress, but it had served him well too many times to ignore her. Except when it was dead wrong, of course. When morning came and nothing happened, Lith cursed at himself. Hindsight is always 100% correct, Solus chuckled. The members of the expedition went back to study the door, and before any of them could notice, dawn turned into sunset. Lith had even tried using fire vision at noon to spot hidden compartments. If a switch was camouflaged under a fake rock, it should have shown a different coloration at his thermal vision when compared with the rest of the rock wall after being heated for hours by Yandra's spell. Unfortunately, even this attempt failed. Lith spent dinner with Yandra and Kyla, comparing notes in search for a solution. The expedition was Lith's best shot at getting his hands on ancient ODI technology that might help him solve his reincarnation problem. If we crack this riddle and in the future I find more ruins on my own, I'll know how to get in. If we fail despite so many wise mages working together, I might as well check the ODI off my list of possible solutions. He thought. During the third day, Lith started to become restless just like the assistant professors. The older mages knew that solving ancient mysteries required time, effort, and luck, whereas their aides took failure personally. After whispering, "Open sesame," in front of the door, obtaining nothing in return but an awkward echo, Lith asked Professor Gaku, the language expert. What's the ODI word for friends? Glavrish, why? After a painful second that shattered his last hopes, he replied. No reason, I was just curious, he said while Solus laughed her ass off at his expense. When dinner time came, Lith decided to give a break to both himself and Yandra, spending the evening with his friends. After receiving her own skinwalker, Kyla's mood had improved a lot, but she was getting gloomier with each passing day. Gods, it's so frustrating to me. I'm probably the one that knows more about the ODI among all the assistants taking part in the expedition since I've been researching them for over a year now. Yet my contribution is close to zero, Kyla said. I'd rather not work while I eat. If I hear another word about arrays, I'm going to scream. Lith said, but since we are already there, maybe there's something we are missing. When I taught magic to Tista, I improved my foundations by learning from my own teachings. Maybe if you tell us what you know about the ODI, we could better understand their way of thinking. First of all, they were conceited, self-centered bastards, Kyla said with a voice full of spite. Their laws allowed them to have slaves, as long as they weren't ODI, and they treated the other races worse than their cattle. The ODI would use their slaves as guinea pigs, infecting them on purpose with the illnesses they had yet to cure. When healing magic wasn't enough, they would resort to body sculpting, permanently altering their subjects' physiology trying to make them immune to congenital diseases. Once they achieved perfect health, they moved on altering their appearance so that every member of their race would be born with what they considered to be perfect proportions. For decades they attained countless feats, uncaring for their cost since they weren't the ones paying for it. Then, they tried to defeat aging and failed. You know the rest. They were obsessed with the search for perfection in every aspect of their life. I mean, look at the arrays. The word was enough to make Lith's head throb. The spacing between the runes, the way they overlap with each other, and the door at the same time. It's a seamless formation with no weak points. Lith reviewed his notes inside Soluspedia, comparing them with Kyla's words. It's indeed an amazing piece of work, he said, his eyes fixated in a blank spot as he examined the runes one by one and forced himself not to puke. Even if there are 5 arrays covering the door, The resulting structure resembles that of a musical score. Each rune is perfectly placed. One flows into another and is reinforced by the other runes surrounding it as it in turn reinforces them. Yeah, it's almost like. That's it, I think I know how to open that door. Kyla stood up abruptly, flipping her plate. Only a well-timed use of spirit magic saved the innocent food. She dragged Floria and Lith to Professor Gaku's campfire to share her success with them. Gaku was the head of the expedition. Her permission was required before making an attempt at opening the barrier. We got it all wrong, Professor. There aren't 5 arrays, just one, and I know how to open it. Kyla said. Nonsense, Majornas. Any of us, you included, can detect 5 different structures and their unique power nodes. We have even identified the purpose of each one of them. No, that's where you are wrong. You have identified the purpose they have when you take them separately, and that's why there's no solution. Please humor me. What happens if you consider them as a single array? What becomes of their runes? Professor Gaku sighed, using water magic to write down the information about the different arrays on a single page. I can't just say no to Majornas. At least she has shown initiative and confidence. The morale is already bad as it is. Trying and failing is better than letting yourself fall into despair, she thought. At least until the entire picture appeared in front of her eyes. This is amazing. The 5 arrays actually do combine into a single one with its own purpose. She blurted out as her Supreme Magus. By Novel 2025. 1. Supreme Magus. Chapter 644 Perfect Solution Part 2. Exactly. They split the array into different parts to disguise its real structure. Kyla said. It's more than that, said Professor Nishal, the Master Warden from the Earth Griffin. The 5 arrays can work both individually and as one. The ODI found a way to make overlapping arrays more than the sum of their parts. But you are right. The final array is the weak spot because once you discover the truth, it allows you to destroy them all at once. It's unbeatable if you don't know the trick behind it, but once you do, you can topple them all like a house of cards. It would be revolutionary otherwise. She sighed. Nishal admired the ODI for their ingenuity and despised them at the same time for their conceit. They had clearly thought that no member of the lesser races would notice the fatal flaw in their creation. Excellent work, Kyla, said Professor Festa from the White Griffin. I'll make sure that you are rewarded properly by the Academy. Without your insight, we might have wasted days standing in front of the door. Thanks, Professor. She was brimming with joy. Can we open it now? Absolutely not, all those present said in unison. We have no idea what lies beyond the gate and we are all tired. We will work on the 6th array after we are fully recovered and are ready for any surprise the ODI might have left behind. Professor Gaku said. Kyla was kind of disappointed. After struggling so hard and for so long, she had to continue waiting to see if the fruits of her labor would pay off. Lith didn't share her anxiety. He didn't need life vision or mana sense to perceive the danger that kind of array posed to his life. The next morning, the professors used earth magic to conjure a table made of stone and worked together to safely open the door. As soon as all the papers were laid on the stone surface, Lith made his proposal. I don't think that opening the array is a good idea. Destroying it will require the same energy and it's much safer. Are you insane? More than one professor said. That kind of technique in laying arrays constitutes a relic by itself. Even if it's a faulty product, we could study it and learn a lot about the ancient ODI magic. We might even find a way to improve their creation, Professor Sindra said. Indeed, but what if we open the door, trigger a trap, and the arrays activate again? What if they shoot us in the back the moment we walk through that door? Is a single relic worth our lives? He spoke looking in Floria's eyes. She was the commander of the expedition and the only one who was aware of the anomalies occurred while battling the techs. I agree with Ranger Verhan, she said. Take your time to study and copy the array formation if you must, but no one is going inside until that thing is taken down. The first rule for every combat situation is to have a clear retreat path. If the ODI's defense system identifies us as members of the lesser races, and the gate closes behind us, we'd have no time to open it again. Leaving our back exposed is out of the question. My decision is final. What started as a low grumble soon rose in intensity, until outraged yells echoed throughout the entire cave. Give it a rest, will you? Marok's voice overcame them all like a roar. We could be attacked by a whole army and I would miss their arrival because of your yapping. If you want to die, leave me out of it. The bickering went on until it started to grind on Floria's nerves. Maybe you're not familiar with how the army works. The discussion is over, she said. Maybe, and maybe not. Professor Gaku replied. Over 2/3 of the members of the expedition disagree with you. We demand to speak with your commanding officer. How dare you questioning my judgment? Her voice was low, yet it was perfectly audible and scarier than any angry yell or threat. I dare because I think that due to your young age you fail to realize how important this discovery might be, Captain Ernest. Ours is not just the temper tantrum of some old fogies. Gaku replied. We are concerned that your hasty decision can harm the development of magic and the kingdom itself. Not to mention that albeit Ranger Verhan has a point, I believe that your past relationship is affecting your judgment. Being careful is good, being paranoid is not. As the head of the expedition, it's in my right to veto your decision if it damages the kingdom. Fine, Floria knew Gaku was right. Since there was no emergency situation and the army communication amulet still worked, she had to relay the message. Yet it was the first time during her military career that someone had disrespected her orders so blatantly. She broke the communication silence and called the High Command, explaining to them everything that had happened. She mentioned Lith's insight on the most recent attack and emphasized the risks that keeping the array would imply. Interesting, Commander Baryon replied while tapping his mahogany desk with his forefinger. Who proposed to preserve the array? He asked. Judging from his choice of words and his tone of voice, the professors understood that he agreed with them, so they introduced themselves one by one. With the Mage Association's bleak-looking future, receiving the support of a rising star in the army like Baryon could lead to countless benefits. Even some of those who had previously agreed on destroying the formation switched sides. Only Professor Yandra and Professor Syndra were adamant in putting their safety first and didn't change their mind. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your honesty. I have to agree with Captain Ernaz and Ranger Verhan. They both have a 100% mission success rate, so I'll trust their judgment since it's the only reason you are still alive. No offense, Professor Gaku, but without Ranger Eerie the coordinates of the ruins would be lost. On top of that, in case the expedition gets wiped out, the kingdom would have lost some of their most valuable subjects. Captain Ernaz is right. Study the formation as much as you want and take it down when you are ready. Over and out. Baryon's calm attitude disappeared as soon as the communication ended. Damn idiots, I didn't invest so much to keep Ranger Verhan under my command just to lose him to preserve a crappy array. Even if he wasn't there, I would think twice before putting at risk one of the Ernaz's daughters on a whim, but two of them? I like my head where it is. Once he managed to calm down, he called his secretary and instructed him to update the status of the expedition. I don't know whether those professors suffer just from hubris or dementia, and I don't care. Flag their personal files as unfit to command for the next missions. Meanwhile, in the cave, Lith was sighing in relief. I'm not willing to risk my life for those morons. Worst case scenario, I'd have been forced to commit insubordination. Luckily for me, Baryon earned his spot by working in the field.